We grow and preserve a lot of our own food, and we grow a huge amount of fruit, a lot of which ends up dried. People are often interested in, what do you do with all that dried fruit? Well, today we're making homemade, homegrown mince pies. Hello and welcome to English Country Life. Welcome to our kitchen. Welcome to homegrown, homemade mince pies. Before we start, let me tell you a little bit about mincemeat, because it's a name that puts a lot of people off, particularly people who didn't grow up with it in Britain as most of us did. Mincemeat these days doesn't contain meat. Okay, let's get that out of the way. It is dried fruit, spices, sugar, some fat, often butter or suet, brandy, all those good things. The sort of flavours that go in the richest, most succulent, most moist fruit cakes or Christmas puddings. That kind of dense, dark, rich, moist flavours. So if minced meat in a sweet pie sounds awful, don't worry, there's no meat in it these days. There was originally. It was a preserving method. Minced meat with dried fruit and fats and sugars and vinegars back in the day were put together to preserve the meat. And as sugar became more widely available, more and more sugar was added, it became sweeter. Then people actually cut down the meat, ate it as a dessert dish, and eventually the meat is just a memory. Although some people, I have been told of some people who still follow the hundreds-of-year-old recipes that call for beef or mutton or even venison in their minced meat. But most of the commercial stuff you buy, spiced dried fruit with all manner of goodness in it. Ours is a little bit different. It's not a commercial variety, so let's talk about that. So let's talk a little bit about this recipe then. Our daughter Samantha has her own daughter now, Clara. And I have to wave to her because Clara blows kisses to Papa when she watches these videos with her mum. So, hello Clara! Samantha wants to make mince pies on Christmas Eve with Clara for Santa. And she's asked us if we could pitch in with a mincemeat. Well, normal people would nip to the shop and buy some currants and raisins and candied peel and make some mincemeat. But this is us. We dry a lot of fruit. We harvest our own nuts. So can't we do something with that? Let's take a quick look at how we dry and prepare and harvest our fruit and how we harvest our nuts. And then we'll look at the ingredients we plan to use and try and make up a recipe. This is our home-produced ingredients then that we're going to use for Clara's mincemeat. Now, commercial mincemeat is based around currant sultanas, you know, the kind of dried grape type fruit, candied peel, apples and nuts, roughly. I think that in England we don't grow a lot of eating grapes. There are some vineyards. I have grown grapes on the South Downs, but they're not that common. And I think much more likely for the dark fruit years ago would have been plums, blackberries or tayberries and currants. So that's what we're going to use. In place of the candied peel, we're going to use dried raspberries and strawberries from this year to give that slightly acidic, slightly higher note kick. We're going to use our own dried apples. We're going to use our hazelnuts. We do have walnuts, but we're not getting any nuts off them yet because they're only young trees. Thankfully, Engineer Dave lives about 120 yards that way, and he lets us take nuts from his very mature walnut trees. So that's roughly our ingredients, but we do need to prepare them before we use them. These are our hazelnuts. They're actually cob nuts, which is a slightly improved strain of hazelnut with a larger nut in it. They store best like this, in the shell, but they taste best when shelled and roasted for about 15 minutes in a medium oven. The thing is, once you roast them, they will only really last 2 or 3 months. So best to store whole, then roast and use fairly quickly. There we are then. Bowl of cob nuts and hazelnuts. Not quite the same nut, we grow both. We planted cob nuts basically for the nuts. We planted hazelnuts as part of an edible hedge that we have, and they both yield some nuts for us, although cob nuts are larger and a different shape of nut meat. Let's have a quick look. Interesting to see the difference between a hazelnut and a cob nut. We grow both. These are hazelnuts. Small and almost round, whereas the cob nut is a much larger nut, longer and deeper. And you do get a lot more nut meat from a cob nut. So if you're going to plant them just for their flesh, I suggest the cob nut over the hazelnut. So what I want to do now is I'm going to dry roast those nuts. This is just a small enamel roasting tin. I really like enamelware. And you want your nuts to spread out in the bottom of your roasting tin, not quite touchy, but you don't want it massively too big for the nuts either. So that's a pretty good size for what we're going to do. I'm going to pop those into the essie on a medium heat for just about 15 minutes. Right, the next step, we've got to prepare our fruit. Now this is our dried plums. It's a quarter plum, dried rock hard. It'd be totally awful if we tried to use it as is. But if we soak it and it rehydrates, it makes a lovely soft kind of dried fruit. Better yet, we can soak it in booze. So for our dark fruits, I want something that fits with that. Now, a brandy is made from grapes, which are, when dried, become a dark fruit. So what about our own cherry brandy? With the apples, we make our own cider. We can rehydrate them in cider, maybe a shot of apple brandy as well, just to make it taste good. And for the strawberries and raspberries, we make a wonderfully rich strawberry cordial. And I might, in fact I will, I'll give it a shot of limoncello as well, just to lift it and make it zingy, because we want some dark rich flavours, we want some light notes in there as well. So I'm going to soak the fruit differently, see if we can achieve that. So here's our dark fruits. We've got mostly dried plums, but also blackberries and a few dark currants. And on top, to rehydrate it, our homemade cherry brandy. We'll keep stirring that so that's all absorbed. There aren't precise numbers on this. If I find that all of that hasn't softened the fruit enough, I'll add a little bit more. If I find there's brandy left over when the fruit's softened, well, I'll strain the fruit off and drink the brandy. And it kind of works a little bit like that with home dried fruits. Here's our dried apple rings. You can hear how dry they are. So we do need, again, to soak those. Now, you can soak these kind of dried fruits in anything you want, and water's fine. That's what we drove off from them. Or apple juice would work really well. On these, just a drop of our homemade cider to really get them nice and soft and moist. Is that enough? Almost certainly. So it would be really indulgent to put a drop of really expensive Calvados, which is a French apple brandy. But let's be indulgent. Now in this bowl we've got dried raspberries and dried strawberries. And I'm just opening homemade strawberry cordial, just to rehydrate those into beautiful sweet softness. I'm going to add just a drop, not a huge amount, but a drop of this wonderful limoncello, just to lift that taste and give it that citrus note that you do get from candied peel. Good morning. What I'm doing here now, the next day, is just straining off all the fruit of any excess fruity booze that's sort of slopping around. We want the fruit soft, but not swimming in liquid. So any of that fruity booze that's left over must be safely destroyed. And the correct way of doing that is over a bowl of ice cream. After we've done that, I'm going to weigh the dark fruits, the plums, the tayberries, the blackcurrants, and I'm going to adjust the red berries and the apples in proportion to the weight that I have of those. So for example, however much dark fruit I've got, I want half as much apples. Let's do that now. There we go then. So what we've got roughly is, for every 4 parts of dark fruit, 2 parts of apples, 1 part of berries. If you were doing this with a more traditional, commercial type mincemeat recipe, you'd be looking at 4 parts of currants, raisins and sultanas, to 2 parts fresh Bramley apple, to 1 part candied peel. Next step in the process is to reduce the softened fruit to small pieces, not a mush, but small pieces, sort of 1/4 inch, 5mm cubes. You can do it with a knife and it doesn't take long. But I've got a food processor, so a quick whiz on that will do the job. And that's what we end up with. A nice, finely chopped, but still distinct pieces of fruit. I'm going to put that into a big bowl and then blitz up the rest, and then we'll add the rest of the ingredients. Doesn't that look good? I mean, all it is succulent plums and strawberries and raspberries and apples and blackberries, rehydrated with wonderful homemade booze and chopped up finely. I mean, what's not to like? Let's add the rest of our ingredients then, the stuff that didn't need to go through the food processor. Don't worry about the proportions, I'll put the recipe up at the end. Mix them in just with a wooden spoon and we'll move on to the next part. This is all the rest of the ingredients that we're going to need. First up are chopped nuts. Now I'm using, as you know, cob nuts, hazelnuts, just a few of Engineer Dave's walnuts there. Chopped mixed nuts from the supermarket, absolutely fine. Almonds, absolutely fine. Whatever you like. Next bit, peel. This is freshly grated lemon and orange peel. After that, we're going to add spice. The spices that I use are mixed spice, nutmeg and cinnamon. All those wonderful winter flavours. Sugar. You want a fine grained sugar, and I don't think white sugar works. It's too chemically. So I'm using a soft, dark brown fair trade sugar. And lastly, we need some fat just to bind this together. I'm using suet. Suet is a beef fat. That might sound odd. It actually is almost tasteless. It's a perfect fat for cooking with. In much the same way that you use lard in pastry, it doesn't overwhelm it. If the thought of using a beef product worries you, butter is a perfectly acceptable substitute. Freeze it and grate it or finely cube it before you mix it in. What we do now, give everything a really good stir, get everything evenly distributed in the bowl. Now that we've mixed up our mincemeat, we need to get it in some jars. So I'm going to bung some clean washed jars in the oven, just heat them up for a few minutes. While those jars warm up, just going to pop the mincemeat on the hot side of the hot plate. We're just going to melt that all together to make sure all the ingredients are properly blended. What I'm really looking for here to tell me that this stuff is ready is that all the suet, or butter if that's what you're using, will have melted and blended nicely with the sugar and fruit. Once the jars are warm and all the lovely mincemeat has melted and blended together, just use a jam funnel and pack the mincemeat into warm jars. And there we have them, homegrown, home-dried, homemade mince pies. Well, I'm really pleased with how they've turned out. With the raspberries and the strawberries, it's a lighter feeling. It's not as heavy and claggy as a traditional mincemeat. Much fruitier, much zingier, a little bit of limoncello, and the peel gives it a citrusy note that again lifts it from just being heavy and dense. And I think that's more traditional. We've preserved and cooked with what we grow, and I'm sure years ago people would have done that. That's when we had plum puddings, because we don't grow grapes in much of England, but we do grow plums. If you're enjoying this kind of content, can you spare us 5 seconds for a thumbs up? If you want to leave a comment or a wave to Clara, so much the better. We've got a lot of stuff coming up in the new year. We're going to be doing that mustard that we keep promising you. We're going to do soap making. We've got a lot more making, doing, growing, all sorts of food preserving. There's so much we want to cover. It's just time to get it recorded. And if you want to watch that, please hit the subscribe button down below, hit the bell icon next to it, and you'll hear every time we upload new content. But in the meantime, have a Merry Christmas, a Happy Hanukkah, a good Yule, and enjoy it with yourself, with your friends, with your family, and with a few seasonal snacks. Whatever you do. Come back and see us soon. Take care.